Okay, so in this here, we're going to do another example, and this is using the distributive property. So we're going to simplify these using the distributive property, simplify them if possible. And so let's get started. So the first one, we have this, and so we're going to use the distributive property because we can distribute, again, across addition. So we can distribute the 3 across. So we're multiplying, right? We're multiplying this big thing. We're multiplying this times this. Well, we can distribute the multiplication to each term across addition and subtraction. So let's do that. So that means I can write this as 3x plus 3y. And I can't simplify it any further than that. Okay. Now, what about the next one? So here I have a negative sign out here. Now, it might be helpful to realize that this is like having a negative 1 out here. So see how we have the 3 over here? This is like having a negative 1 times. So anytime you see a negative sign, it's like having a negative 1. It's implied that it's a negative 1 that you're distributing, okay? So what happens if you distribute the negative 1? Or you're going to do negative 1 times this and negative 1 times this. So you're distributing across subtraction. So that means, in other words, we've got negative 1 times m minus a negative 1 times 4n. So all I did was use the distributive property. And now I can simplify it. So this becomes negative m and a minus a negative, right? So like a negative times a negative here. If you want to write this as a plus negative, the two negatives cancel each other out and it just becomes plus 4n. Right? And now if you want to, now again, you can leave it as a negative m, or you could just use the commutative property and write it as 4n minus m. And you can leave it at that. The next one, C, says you have 7p plus 21. So 7p plus 21. So how can we simplify this? Well, you don't have anything like this. It's not like you have anything to distribute, but there's nothing to say we can't do distribution property in reverse, right? It's an equal sign. So what is it that we can pull out of here? What factor, right? So this is a factor. These are factors. This whole thing right here is a factor. This whole thing is a factor, right? So we're multiplying these two factors. So what can I pull out of here that I can write it as some factor times something in parentheses? Well, I look for a common factor here. Well, p, I can't pull p out because p is not a common factor. But is there a common factor between 7 and 21? Are there two numbers that will divide either one of these? And the answer is 7. So I can pull a 7 out. In fact, that's the greatest common factor, which is what we want. So now, I have to think, there's a p here, right? Well, I have to, again, remember, I have to make sure that I can go the other way and get back to where I was at. So 7 times what equals 7? That's going to be 1. 7 times what equals 21? That's going to be 3. So now I know that this is going to be 7 times the quantity, p, plus 3. Okay, so I just did the distributive property in reverse. Okay, and that's okay, you can do that. It's called factoring. That's what we call it. We call it factoring. This way it's called distributing. If we use the distributive property in reverse, it's called factoring. Okay, so now, what about this one? How can we simplify this one? Well, we're going to use the distributive property. So we're going to distribute the 1/3. And this time we're going to get to distribute it across 3 terms, which is fine. There's nothing that says you can't do that. It's all subtraction, so we can distribute this, to this, and to this. So what do? We end up getting what? 1/3 times 4/5 m minus 1/3 times 3/2 n minus 1/3 times 27. And that's where we start. Now I can use the associative property, the commutative property, whatever I need to multiply these two together, right? The m is going to be separate, so I'm going to use the associative property and multiply these two together. And so that's going to give me what? That's going to give me 4/12 m, or I'm sorry, not 4/12. That's going to give me 4/15 m minus, now here, this 3 is going to cancel with this 3, right? Because I can divide out the 3's. Because it's multiplication across division, right? You can look at fractions as division. So I can get, this is going to become 1/2 n. And then of course 1/3 of 27 is 9. And I can't simplify this any further. So this is my answer. And that's how you do it. Again, practice. Practice, 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 okay? It'll save you a lot of grief later on. Okay, see you next time.